Afternoon, Professor. Um, my name is John Weaver. I am a student over at Antelope Valley College in Lancaster, California. I've got a major in English, but I would prefer if it was in political science or history at the same time. I caught your interview on Dateline MSNBC uh, just a short time ago. It's October 5th. It is Thursday. And time index right now is 1:42 p.m. I do that a lot on my logs and my videos. Yeah, I'm very worried what's going on these days. I'm 57 years old, and I thought I'd seen nearly everything in my lifetime that I could see concerning about politicians and politics and how people are treating each other left and right. My God, what the hell is going on, Professor? I had a political science professor, and I was in the class for about three classes of him. Professor John Vento here. He's a legend on the campus. Everybody loves this guy. He engages the students into political discussions, but the thing is, he doesn't put his own viewpoints ahead of anything else. He wants students to understand the system and how it works and what's going on around them and be totally aware of all the ramifications. He likes to hear the students' viewpoints because he can also use it for his next class session if he needed to, or the next term. But he doesn't like engaging with anybody else about his own viewpoints regarding it. I challenged the professor years ago. And there's a long story in this one. Let's not get into that one just yet. But I engaged my professor, and I was trying to explain something about democracy versus Russia. We had an argument about that one. There's types of governments out there that are either considered autocratic or democratic. And despite what Putin has in Russia, it's still considered democratic, according to my professor. I said, no. He goes, no, no. He's got people voting him in. You don't understand. He's autocratic. Yes, I do, but it's still voting him in. I said, it's a false Democrat. It's a false democracy here. With democracy, you have parties competing with each other. You have political ideologies bouncing off of each other. You have the political clash. But when you have a politician killing off the competition, quite literally, and doesn't care about it, it's no longer considered a democracy. It's an autocracy, and he's using the front for it. I think he still liked that argument. And he still argued with me. He said, it's still a democracy because they're still voting. I said, no, Professor. They may be still voting, but they're forced into the situation to make it look like it's democracy. Even the world data that we keep going into, some of those websites that you wanted us to research the information on, well, they even support that Putin is an autocrat. I think maybe, even if I was getting C's in this class during those days, I did impress him by me trying to pay attention to the world politics, and not to mention in the United States of what's been going on. I've been seeing it. I've been seeing it. And I'll admit to you, at times I just wanted to bury my head and scream into the ground. Because I feel like, how do you change the opinions of those who have already been converted? We have more than just a cult following here, Professor. I don't understand it, sir. I even tried to send a letter over to my political science professor, Mr. Fentel. I never got a response back from the guy. I guess it's just as well. To you, I'm sending this over because you intrigued me a little bit there. Your passion concerning about what Trumpism doing to everybody else. Professor, I've been trying to pound this damn thing in my in my head like crazy on this one. I've been trying to understand it. I'm even scared of going into Fox News just to try to understand the insanity of it. It's just there are political pundits and social media out there who are also following the same conservative bylines, and they're doing worse than Trumpism at this point. It's like, was he the cap on the well that was busted off, and now we got the ooze all over the place, and we can't even get rid of it or the stench? And the thing of it is, we're looking for normalcy, and I think we've lost it. I think we've lost it, Professor. I mean, you're probably old enough to remember what the politicians were like back in the 80s. I was a teenager during that time. You remember the show called The McLaughlin Group? It was on ABC 7 at the time. It came right after George Stephanopoulos' show he's doing this week with George Stephanopoulos in our time period right now. But back then, and they were doing the roundhouses left and right. And then there was John McLaughlin, his show coming up, and his group of conservatives. Now, I mean, I'm a diehard lib. I'm what they call a libtard libturd. I earned that one. I live in Kern County, California, which is unfortunately the home of the disgraced, yay, McCarthy. Boo. My town is Trumpian, for the most part anyway. They don't fly the red flags or the shirts or the caps, but they do the American portion left and right. And the fun part about this town is we're right next to an airbase. Oh yeah, we're a fun town out here, that's for sure. But they don't go in for the rallies of maggots. They don't. McLaughlin, when I saw his group, they were talking about conservative principles, and I was listening to it. I didn't understand at the time what the difference between a Democrat and a conservative was. Well, the conservatives were Republicans, right? Not necessarily when you had conservatives in the Democratic Party. But I didn't know anything about this. I mean, I'd studied a little bit, tried to pay attention to high school government classes. It was just one. Just to give us the principle of what we were supposed to be learning about. We had the history courses of teaching us what history was supposed to be in America. But without any perspective and context at this point over here, one ear out the other ear. So it's all by rote. Nothing sticking. I was watching the political shows. I was trying to understand what these guys were talking about. And I read the headlines. And I kept watching the news. And I kept reading the newspapers. And listening to more news. I kept wondering how the adults ever managed to process all this information coming down their throats all the time. I didn't understand it back then, Professor. Maybe I should have been paying attention more. I didn't have the opportunities of talking with the elders who fought in World War II enough. I did about a school year worth of volunteerism over at a VA hospital that was nearby to us. And I had spoken to World War II veterans over there in World War I. But we really didn't share the stories deep enough. History was right in front of me, Professor, and I missed up on those opportunities. When I got out of high school, barely squeaked, but I got out. And then I tried to survive 2 years of community college. And during that time, we did have Auschwitz survivors coming in to do a forum. But I tell you, there was not much students just still sitting around and listening, except for those who've actually had parents and grandparents who went through it to understand why. I listened in the background. Again, no context, no perspective. I would see the numbers on the arms. It was not until like a few years later my family decided to take a trip over to the Simon Wiesenthal Museum of Tolerance out in Los Angeles. West Hollywood, I think. It's on Sunset Boulevard somewhere. Then I got perspective. This was well after the 92 riots that we had. The 1992 riots in Los Angeles. Rodney King, perhaps that rings a bell. Oh, yeah. I was working at the time at a store watching this, watching the news stories unfold. I really did notice one of my managers was walking around. Black gentleman, Robert Green, who was video manager. I was working at Circuit City at the time as a cashier. We had televisions. We had one major television in Cashier Row right above our heads. And he's watching this, the news story. I didn't understand that look. Horror, anger, fear, disgust. Not at Rodney King. At the four police officers beating the living crap out of Rodney King. Turn that off. Well, we turned it off, and he went away, and we didn't talk about it after that. It's not until we actually had the 92 riots I was actually seeing what the hell was going on. But prior to that, I got laid off from the job. And no, take that back. I got fired. I got separate. I got fired from the job. One of these few days, I may talk about the reasons with you on this one. I watched the Rodney King trials, or the circus, if you want to call it that, out in Simi Valley, California. The valley right next to the San Fernando Valley where I was living in. Yeah, I'm a SoCal native. What can I say? At this point, I was wondering what the hell was going on. They kept showing the clips and kept talking about it, kept talking with the officers left and right what was happening. Rodney King was almost in no condition to be interviewed. This guy was still recovering from his injuries. I saw the tapes. I'm like, oh my God, what the hell? Yeah. I saw it. Chief Daryl Gates was running LAPD at the time, and he was having conflicts with Mayor Tom Bradley. This guy was cool to meet, and my brother told me. First black mayor of Los Angeles, and I missed opportunities of meeting this guy because he seemed to be a pretty decent guy to know, I'll tell you that much. But Gerald, I'm like, Chief Gates, God, what an asshole. But he rose up through the ranks and became the toughest police chief and the racist, I guess. If he allowed officers under this command to continue what the hell they were doing during those days, no wonder Ellie had a bad reputation and deserved to get examined fully by the federal government, apparently, during those days. But while we're watching the things happening on television, you could feel the tension outside, Professor. You could feel the explosive nature of it. The tension level in the valley was increasing at this point. I mean, we were multicultural, multilingual. I mean, there are sections in the valley that you would hear only Spanish, Chinese. Certain areas you'd hear Armenian. And I had lived in certain areas of the valley all my life. Bounced around from place to place to place. So yeah, you get a cultural experience of what the world's like probably outside the valley. And I was seeing it up close and personal. Try to give me some context and perspective right here. I'm trying to get something explained here, Professor. I hope I'm doing a good job on this one because this is going to be a long video and you're going to be hating it. So anyway, we saw the trial. We saw the results of it. Me and my mother were watching this thing. My brother was at a oil refinery out in South Central. And then we saw all hell broke loose. An hour, within the hour after the verdict was read, Normandy went up. I mean, jeez. What was it? Reginald Denny was a truck driver who damn near died. He was getting his ass beat up by the neighborhood kids out there and the juveniles. And yes, it was black territory. But they also had Oriental stores in the area. But primarily it was black. And they were livid. I'm watching this go down. Sky 5 was out there. Channel 5, KTLA. We're watching this on the television. My jaw, they're on the ground dragging like crazy. We're watching this damn thing. We couldn't believe this. What the Sam Hill was happening to us? A feeling of fear and of dread and of terror was happening. Because if it was happening out there, we didn't realize in portions of the San Fernando Valley was also going through the same thing. So we saw portions of our valley, and not to mention parts of city of Los Angeles, getting torched by anger, by hatred, by frustration. Didn't matter who lit the damn flame, it was there. Now, I wasn't old enough to remember what the 1960 riots were like, but I'm seeing the 90s. It was ugly, Professor. It was damn ugly. Scared the hell out of me. Growing up, I'd never known such anger and hatred towards another race. I had experienced it, but never understood it. Growing up as a kid, you bounce around from neighborhood to neighborhood. When you're rich, you move from place to place to place. Sometimes for a year, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4. And during one year, we had, moving from one neighborhood to another neighborhood, my brother and I had a car accident, ruined the car. My mother went over across the next door to our house that we're moving into and found this Creole neighborhood, this Creole family. Wonderful, sweet family. They became our extended family for over 40 years. Till they lost their mother and then we lost contact with them. That sucked. They're like blood brothers. But I've known what racism felt like when I moved from a multicultural, almost accepting school in the public education system, and to go into another part of the valley. At the same time, we wrecked a car, and I get into an elementary school, predominantly Latina and black. Black barely tolerated me, and the Latina hated my ass because I'm white. And the neighborhood was like that. And the school was harsh to deal with for about 2.5 years. Graduating out of elementary school into junior high, I went back into what I was used to in the school prior to elementary. But it changed me. I felt like I couldn't trust anybody. I had been changed and didn't even realize it. Get out of a junior high into a senior high for 3, or actually 4 years. I screwed up 1 year. Long story on that one, Professor. And I had multi-ethnic friends. I didn't care. I looked at them as human beings, and we were the geeks and the rejects of the school. We weren't cool enough. No, but we still tolerated each other without trying to kill each other. And they were good people too. I was trying to get over the racism and the intolerance and the bigotry that I had experienced. Of course, if you want to talk about economic bigotry here, between the haves and the have-nots, I'll do another video on that with you. Maybe one time, Professor. Getting back to the story. Decades later, we're talking about maybe about a year or two after the riots, my family decided to go over to the Simon and Wiesenthal Museum. And we went into the exhibits. My stomach was sick. I had been tensing up like crazy. I was looking forward to it, but when I walking through the exhibits, listening to it, seeing the films, and then finally getting it. There's only so much that you can watch in elementary and in junior high concerning about a world at war. There was a series back in the 70s concerning about the war that happened that the greatest generation fought. And then the atrocities and the bigotry. Everything was clicking into place. And I saw the 92 riots exhibit. My home turf. It was a good thing I didn't eat anything in my stomach, Professor. It was a good thing I didn't eat anything at all. And I walked in that museum. I walked through those exhibits. And I exited the area, the central lobby that they had over there. And I guess one of the rabbis over there was seeing the tears streaming down my face. I guess Ma was busy being pushed by my brother. I was in a wheelchair at the time. No, she wasn't in a wheelchair. We didn't have the wheelchair during those days. She did walk through the thing. But I didn't see it on her face, and I sure as hell saw something on my brother's face. I couldn't stop the tears. I couldn't stop the tears, Professor. Here is, if I'm going to be opening up Pandora's box on this one, here is pure racial hatred. Books don't cover it enough. Perspective does. It just made me hate being that kind of person more and more, of turning into a race monster, turning into a hate monster. I never wanted to do that with another person as long as I lived. I kept telling myself, no, I can't do that. Because I'd seen Professor, if you've read stories a long time ago about, and I've never read it, but only the concept of it, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You've seen the enemy, and it is us in the mirror. Horrifying, isn't it? Applying it to politics these days. I guess people have experienced racism in their own way. It's become too much of a piece of clothing they can't get rid of. Too damn comfortable, too damn heavy, too damn ugly. They can't get rid of it off of them. It becomes saturated. It becomes part of the skin. It's like marinating meat. Once you get the process started, it's hard as hell to get rid of it. But in the past 20 years or less, I'd seen it grow more and more. No, more than 20 years. Longer than that, Professor. Longer than that. My family was Christian. My brother and I grew up Methodists. We'd been through a few other churches before we found one when we were young kids. We're 8 years difference. He's older. I'm the baby of the family. Notice one thing in the background on my left shoulder here. Bottom shoulder, my mother, my brother, and me. 2002. Notice in the top shelf, you'll see a blue thing right there. I'm going to turn the camera a little bit. I'm going to knock a few things here, but forgive me. Probably don't see it clear enough. My family. Ma in 2013, Dave in 2018, and the dogs in between. I just wanted to give that a little bit of perspective. So yeah, watching the politicians change and mutate into something pretty damn ugly over the past 30 years. I'm still getting that shiver. I'm still getting those feelings like I had back in the museum. Deep down in the soul, you want to throw up and you can't. I wanted to get rid of this damn thing, and you can't do that either. It's like we've got this malignant tumor that we can't excise. We can't use radiation. We can't use chemo. We try to educate. We try to educate. We try to educate. And sometimes the education forms that we use, are they enough? We're almost to the point where we're trying to shake each other's heads by grabbing at both sides of the heads and say, listen to me. Know what I'm going through and understand my viewpoint of what you're saying. Common ground is being torn apart. We're getting solidified sides here. We're getting solidified walls. We're looking at each other more subdivided than anything else. I'm not going to go religious at this point over here. And I'm not going to start doing conspiracy theories at this point. I try to do observations left and right when I'm on YouTube and doing my own channel concerning about my own personal issues about missing my family and me going through lifeboats for my memories. And this is going on it anyway. I live, Professor, in a predominantly mixed area. I haven't heard, but I felt some of the racial tensions around here. I'm trying to avoid it as much as possible because I sure as hell don't want to get into a situation where there's going to be a hell of a lot of yelling and screaming at each other just because of cultural differences we got. I can't stand rap music, but I had listened to it in the past. I just didn't stomach it very well. And the language used, and you know some of the language that that's used. Yeah. Should we call it street ghetto? Is that too, probably it is. And that language is predominant. I'm hearing the youth doing it all the time. I've also heard the adults doing it all the time. And yeah, I've seen how reactions go when people of my skin color would go crazy over the damn thing because they don't like it, they want to be reminded, or something else has been chewing on them. Before I graduate my junior college professor, I still have to take a course by choice, or maybe another semester. That's going to stretch out my graduation right there. I've been at the college for about 7 to 8 years, 2 classes at a time. I figure a guy at my age, I can just take my time and just learn what I can without having anything shoved on me like I did. Professor, as a teenager, mentally, in every which way, I was not ready for college when I came out of high school. So I had to work full time for decades. Ma dies, I go back into college, and being a caregiver to my mother and myself, well, that was hard enough. But then try to be a caregiver to my brother and to myself and going to college at the same time. Isn't that wonderful? I love my brother. I mourn him like crazy. I mourn my family like crazy. But you know what I also mourn? I mourn the family that I lost, the extended family that when they lost their mother, they shut off all communications. And that hurts the worst. It's not physical separation. Besides that, it's the emotional. Yeah, I probably would see their skin color. I didn't see that. I saw them as family. That's the difference right there, Professor. But I wish, if I could pray about it, that we could maybe one day try to see each other in that particular form. I'm not saying that we sing Kumbaya, but understand a few things here and there before we start killing each other. I am scared of what the hell's happening to our democracy right now. I'm also scared of what's happening to us personally. I mean, crap, I don't want to see 1860 being replayed in my lifetime. I don't have any brothers and sisters to lose. And I don't have any cousins I want to kill either. And I sure as hell don't want to be caught in the crossfire in that one. I'm not sure about what sides to take if we actually get into that kind of situation. But it seems like mentally we are getting into that situation. I know this is taking way too much of your time, and I do apologize about this, Professor. I do ramble on quite a bit. I've got an English assignment that's dealing with morality. That's due in about 3 weeks, and I got to get that thing working. I'm doing my topic on mental health. How I was treated back then to currently. I think I'm personally an expert on my own mental health at this point over here, so I think I still need to get the facts and figures for this one. And one more thing, Professor, if I can ask a question of you. You ever heard of math for liberal arts? Yeah, apologize, I got two front teeth, so my communication sucks. Math for liberal arts is involving a lot of logical formulas that I've never come across in my life. Not even working out there do we think about things like this. And the creative topic I got to think about in my class that's going to do in 3 weeks. How do you translate math for the public? I picked out space. Noted astronomers Neil deGrasse Tyler and Carl Sagan. I'm getting more and more of a fan with Professor Tyson. The Sagan. After I saw his Cosmos and read his book and a few others, I was very appreciative of that guy. I was a fan of his. Call me a fanboy. Anyway, I thank you for your time, Professor. I'm sorry for taking away at least a half an hour of it. I wish you well.